Good morning and good afternoon. Excited to have all of you guys here to talk about NACHA's changes in operational rules. We have been, talking about these different deadlines and changes that are coming, and we're excited to show you, how easily you can adjust to these regulations in Unit 21. So just a few logistics. If you can hear me and see me, that is wonderful. If not, there is an FAQ section at the bottom of this page that will give you a few details or things to technically audit your visual audio. This is recorded. It'll be live and available at the same link within 24 hours, and we'll email out the recording. On the tab here, you'll see Q&A. We'd love for you guys to submit your questions throughout the webinar. We will address them throughout, as well as have a short Q&A at the end. So, if it's contextually relevant to what we're talking about, we definitely want to address your questions, and please submit them. There's also resources here. We've published a lot of tactical and practical guides and checklists for abiding by NACHA's new operating rules. You can go there and check those out, and hopefully those are good kind of follow-up reading materials for you to learn on. I'm excited to have Connor and Kunal here, so I'll pass it to them to introduce themselves and they'll jump into it.
All right, thanks, Cassie. Hi, everyone. My name is Kunal. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Unit21. Connor?
Thanks, Kunal. Hi, folks. Very nice to see everybody here. My name's Connor. I lead the Solutions Engineering team at Unit21.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about the NACHA, the new NACHA regulations, and specifically see it in action. So like actually in Unit 21, like what this would look like. And, we've set up some stuff for you to take a look at. For those of you who are not familiar, just a little, background on Unit 21. We're the AI risk infrastructure where you can actually build out AI agents on your own for fraud, for compliance. We've started about 7 or 8 years ago, starting off with transaction monitoring, case management, all configurable, bring any data in, that kind of thing. Ever since, since then, we've also built out a lot of other functionality, right? So there's real-time rules for fraud prevention, a device SDK, customer risk ratings, regulatory filings, and there's a whole lot more, which I'll talk about briefly. But we are what we are not. We are not NACHA representatives or employees. We're not affiliated with or endorsed by NACHA. We're not providing legal or compliance advice here, and nor are we NACHA certification experts. What we are is we are fraud and AML platform experts, and we have over 200 plus customers in all over the world, but many in the US as well who are subject to these regulations and have been talking about this for a while. Across whether it's fintech or crypto, banking, credit unions as well. We are, practitioners who have built this stuff, whether it's real-time detection or just general detection rules, workflows, and regulatory filings for actual regulated institutions, some of the largest in the world and in the US as well. And what we're here to do is we're here to help you adapt your program and show you what's possible, especially in the world of AI. So, just to add that there is, for any legal guidance or counsel, make sure to always consult, your actual compliance counsel. All right. So with that, a little bit more about Unit 21. This slide, you can take a just brief look at it. There's a whole bunch of products that we offer at Unit 21. The basic idea here is under the hood, it's this flexible data infrastructure where you can bring in any kind of data that you want that you feel is important to your risk program. And then on top of that, we offer a whole bunch of things. So transaction monitoring, case management, real-time monitoring, and interdiction for for payments, as well as for things like password changes, logins, other actions. We offer device SDK to actually bring that device intelligence into your product. Then customer risk ratings, watch list screening, so sanctions, PEP, adverse media, transaction screening in real time, ongoing monitoring at onboarding, and then as well as an ad hoc screening product. And then we have a fraud consortium as well across our network of members. On top of this, we also have AI agents, which actually do the work for you. So initially, our product was built for humans to actually do the work. And now what we're doing is building AI agents that do that work for you. And that leads to things like regulatory filings. You can do automated actions, set up your workflows in an automated way, and then, of course, data analysis and reporting and so on within the platform. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the NACHA landscape. So this is sort of a little timeline of what's happening. And, there's the June 22nd date is coming up fairly soon, which is where it becomes effective basically for all remaining non-consumer originators and RDFIs. But really the spirit of the regulation here, right, is, modern ACH fraud, it can look authorized on paper. And, we've all known this for a while. And what's happening now is NACHA is saying, you know what, we want the whole network watching for deception, for mule activity, for suspicious patterns before the money is gone, and essentially making fraud detection a shared obligation, right, across the ACH network, so that every party, not just the ODFI, has to take some sort of reasonable risk-based steps to spot suspicious payments before the fraud moves. So that's sort of in spirit what the regulation here is saying. So what does reasonably designed risk-based controls, what does it mean in practice? You have to have written policies and procedures for ACH fraud monitoring, some sort of detection logic, targeting at very least the named things such as BEC, payroll, redirection, mule accounts, APP fraud. You have to have investigation workflows that can produce defensible documentation around your filings, as well as an annual review of rule performance with documented, risk assessment updates. Now, this is the sort of very basics of this, and we'll kind of show you as we go into this a little bit more, like what actually is possible in the product. So essentially, again, what NACHA wants, right, in 2026, this is coming into effect now, June 22nd date coming up in a little more than a month. Examiners are looking for evidence, not just effort. So you want things like a rule inventory, analytics, an audit trail of everything that you've done and that is happening in your program. It would be great if the entire program, of course, lives in one place, makes this kind of thing a lot easier. I will say that like the real-time screening is not explicitly required, but as long as it is sort of reasonably designed. Okay, what we're going to talk about in the demo here is three things. So one of them is detection rules. So things which are actually building them live, and Connor will kind of show you as we walk through that. We'll talk about investigation workflows as well as AI agents here, and then documentation and like what the audit trails and stuff like that look like in the platform, so you can actually see what it looks like in practice. All right. With that, I'll pass it over to Connor to actually show us the product.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kunal. Let's dive right in. For those of you who are customers, have seen a demo before, have attended a webinar before, some of this may feel a little bit repetitive, but want to cover the basics of how our rules engine works before we dive into some specific examples focused on NACHA compliance. So a couple things for those of you who haven't been exposed to this before. With Unit21, we have a couple of different ways to build rules. We have rules that are designed to run on a schedule. We also have rules that are executed in real time and return results in less than 250 milliseconds. The way we design these is a little bit different, but both are available. We also offer a couple of different testing modes. So as Kunal was mentioning, as you're building your program, as you're building kind of defensibility of why you have set specific rules with specific thresholds, this testing suite of validating and shadow rules is really important and helpful, where you can run back tests on demand against your own production data, or you can run rules in what we call shadow mode, where you can turn them on in the background and run them over time to see what would have been flagged if you had been running these as live rules. So let's get into some kind of specific examples of how we might want to approach different scenarios. So the first one that I'll talk about here is one where we're looking at kind of mule velocity. And so we might be looking at kind of the side of this where we're looking at an RDFI side. We're looking at customers who are receiving ACH payments, and we might want to do a few things to detect this. So we could have a flag for new accounts. We might want to only include accounts that are less than 90 days old. We could also create different variations of this for accounts that are in different kind of age ranges, so to speak, if we want to go that route. And then we're looking for somebody who meets a minimum threshold of the number of unique counterparties who have sent them ACH transactions in, let's say the last 7 days. And then we're also going to look at the sum of those ACH credits and the sum of their ACH debits. Or if we wanted to expand this, not just to ACH, but to any method of transaction that they would use to disperse those funds, we could do that as well. And then we're going to look for anyone who's received transactions from, in this case, 6 or more, but this could be 4 or 5. And there are a bunch of different tools for us to kind of help to explore different values and you to understand like what's there in your data and what might be relevant. And then we're going to have a value of 5,000 as the minimum incoming payments. And then we're looking for somebody who has moved out at least 85% of those incoming funds over the course of this week. All right. I'll take a quick pause there. Kunal, can you keep an eye on questions for me if we do get anything coming in?
You got it.
All right. Let's talk about scenario number 2. So another one that we might want to look at is going to be a payee mismatch. And one of the things that Kunal, might want to jump in and talk about is, for a long time we've had, fuzzy matching on names, and we used, kind of typical string matching, Levenstein fuzzy matching. But one of the things that we've been experimenting with recently, that we found a lot of success with, is AI fuzzy matching. And what this is doing is actually looking at the names in context, and rather than just doing a string distance evaluation, we can actually compare whether or not the names have anything to do with each other. And what is a little bit different with this, give an example. If you were matching 2 names and you had Facebook and Meta, and you were doing purely a string distance match, those would obviously not be related to each other. But in context, those are actually 2 names for the same business entity that were used at various times in their history. And with this AI fuzzy matching, we can actually do things like that and be able to understand in context whether 2 names are related to each other beyond traditional string matching methodology. Kunal, anything else you wanted to add in there?
I think just to add to that, like what Connor mentioned here is like traditionally the string matching is how we've been doing it. Now it's actually, you can also do the semantic matching, right? So I think some like canonical examples here is like Meta and Facebook seem pretty different, right? In terms of the actual strings themselves, but actually they're the same thing, or Alphabet and Google, or Sam's Club and Walmart, right? And these are some of those examples. And of course with like things like nicknames. and so on as well, where like traditionally there have been challenges with just string-based fuzzy matching. LLM fuzzy matching or the AI fuzzy matching actually really helps here. Also, while I'm talking, I suppose I do see a question here from Eric on how do we deal with money being moved out that's not on ACH rails. This is a great question, Eric. So briefly, the way this works in Unit21 is we don't actually have any sort of restrictions on the type of rail. So for us, like data, it's just data. Like a transaction is just data. You can send in a transaction type of any type that you'd like, and then actually use that in your rules to either monitor or block or whatever it may be. So for example, if you wanted to monitor, let's say on ACH, but then for the money out, you wanted to use, I don't know, whatever else your particular transaction type may be.
We could include P2P, we could include wires, we could include, cash withdrawals, or just look at all transaction types that are outgoing money movements instead of being specific about the transaction type.
And even if you have your own internal product, right, like or something like that, which isn't a traditional rail, you can still put that into Unit21 and monitor it. Like, so we don't actually impose any restrictions on that. There's another question here from Dale, and then before I pass it back to you, Connor, what sources are being used to obtain the payee information? Is this data provided in real time? So that's a good question, Dale. So it depends on your institution. So if you're at a bank and this data is in your core, we can bring that data in from your core. If that's in your digital banking, we can bring the data in from there. If you're a fintech and you have that data sitting somewhere else, like in AWS or Azure or some other internal system, we can bring the data in from there as well. So under the hood, basically, Unit21 is fundamentally like flexible data infrastructure where we can really integrate with anything. So any kind of data, you can bring it into Unit21, you can model it in the system itself, in the UI, minimizing the engineering effort there for actual integrations, rather than specific to particular rails or data types. All right, so we have one more question from Krista. So maybe what I'll do is, Connor, I guess it's on AI fuzzy logic. Does it typically decrease the alerts, or is it meant to only add a layer of context matching? How do you explain the AI fuzzy matching to regulators to explain that it is sufficient enough? It's a great question. So there's a few different parts to this. So on the first part, the idea is, yes, it will decrease the number of alerts that you get because you'll get basically less fuzzy matches. On the other hand, it may produce matches that you otherwise may not have gotten. So in that case, it is possible for it to increase as well on the other side. Overall, like from the people who've been using it so far, we've seen that it has overall decreased the number of false positives and given them a more, just better matching capabilities. We do recommend sometimes using this in tandem. So you can also use this alongside a traditional fuzzy matching algorithm, even within the same rule. So you're not limited to just using one or the other. And then on how do you explain it to regulators? This is a great question. So again, number one, you can use it in tandem with other things if you want. If you want to just use it by itself, we also have AI agents, which we'll show you in a bit on the investigation side, which can actually create a full-on explanation for you of exactly what the logic was for that rule, why it flagged, like a full report essentially on each alert for the actual reasoning for why that it flagged the way it did. That will provide basically any sort of from the regulatory perspective, like probably more thorough, honestly, than what a human would otherwise just put down in their notes. All right, Connor, back to you.
Thanks, Kunal. All right. So on to our next example. And this one is one where we might be looking for, payroll redirection. And this is something where we might want to be taking a look at this from the perspective of the receiver. And this is even as an ODFI, where we might want to create, unique entity records for receivers of outgoing ACH transactions. And the reason that we want to do that is we might want to be able to write rules where we look at the velocity of unique receiving accounts over a given period of time. So what I can do is say, and this is a real-time rule where we can say, okay, I want to count the unique number of receiving instruments And that could be the unique combination of like account and routing number that we use to define a receiver instrument. And then we can create a rule where if the number of unique receiving instruments exceeds a threshold, in this case, maybe it's just 2. We want to know anytime there is a change in their payment information, we want to generate an alert. And at that point, we can either decline the transaction, or we can also create, let me come here. We can also create a rule that instead returns a request for step-up authentication. And that can either be an automated system. So you could use that response to do something, like send an email or a text message to do step-up authentication. Or it could be something that's more manual, where we trigger an alert, have someone on your team review that, reach out to the customer, and confirm that they intended to make a change in the payroll redirection, that they did in fact want to change where this transaction was being routed to before you complete the process. And then lastly, another rule maybe for business email compromise that we might want to create is something where more from the sender side, we want to look at the kind of number of unique combinations of receivers and receiver accounts over a given period of time. So maybe over the last 365 days. And if we see a change in that, where we have a new variation of a receiver and receiver accounts, kind of thinking about this in the opposite way of what we just did, and we have a large transaction where the amount is more than 1.5x the average transaction amount from the last year. Or we could do things with device data. So if this transaction is initiated from inside of your institution's mobile or web experience, and we see signs of device risk, whether that is a aggregate device fraud score, which we provide, or it could be other device risk signals. I'll come up here to kind of show you everything that's included. But we might have other device risk signals, like whether somebody has a time zone mismatch, or the IP address is on a block list, or they're using a VPN. And so we could combine all of those different risk signals along with the transactional data to look for signs of potential business email compromise. And now, as we kind of transition into the investigation side of this, as Kunal mentioned, we have AI agents that can help you automatically review the alerts that are being generated by these rules to kind of do an even more thorough review of the activity. And the way that our agents work, you can create as many agents as you want so they can be more generalized. And we see people building these for AML review, for various types of fraud, for EDD, for onboarding review, for sanctions review. But you could even get really specific and say, hey, we want to create maybe a specific agent that's just for business email compromise investigations. And then these agents will be set up with a specific set of tasks that can include things like reviewing the flagged activity. So again, looking at the current alert and what happened here, and maybe analyzing the fuzzy match logic and giving you a report on exactly why it was flagged. Could also be looking at, reviewing prior alerts, cases, SARs, analyzing whether there's any behavior shift in the alert activity. Looking at account risk factors like the customer's age or their geography, or whether or not they have any unusual connections through shared emails, phone numbers, IP addresses, or even accounts. Looking at their account tenure. We could also build entirely custom tasks. So if you wanted to do something where we create a task and want to do something like we want to summarize the flagged entity, and then we want to build a profile based on their KYC information. So it could be we want to pull in things from let's say their income statements, and we want to say, okay, we want to pull in their annual income, and we want to pull in their occupation data, and we want to use all of this to build a profile. And maybe we also want to pull in information on their transactions, where they were, the sender or the receiver of those transactions. And this can actually build, kind of a graph of what we're including in this review, and then we can build a prompt to help us analyze this activity. And I'll show you an example that I've already built so you can kind of see what this looks like, where we might want to do something like build an account summary profile. That's not a great example. Let's look at this one. And the output of this is that we can build kind of a custom risk profile based on the inputs that we've set up with this task, that'll get combined with all of the outputs from these other default tasks. Can then include things like structuring analysis or duplicate transaction or counterparty risk analysis. We can include things like online research, where we might do like business entity searches or website validation or online employment verification as part of the investigation. And then all of this will get compiled and analyzed given your narrative instructions. So you can create instructions for how you want the narrative and how you want the determination to be completed. And then you'll assign this to the appropriate queue. So in this case, I've assigned this just to our business email compromise queue. I'm having it auto review the alerts. If you feel comfortable with it, you can also give the AI agents the ability to auto close alerts that it deems to be false positives. And if you choose to do that, you can then audit the AI agent performance as part of your QA/QC workflows. And what this will look like in practice as you get alerts flowing through the system is we have an alert here for a potential business email compromise. And this agent is going to have gone through and reviewed the flagged activity for our flagged entities, profiled the risk associated with each of these, performed event analysis and online research for all of these flagged entities. In this case, we had our primary subject and two counterparties that they interacted with. And then this will all be compiled and we'll have a determination of what should be done next. In this case, it's recommending a human review and that we should call the originator to verify these transactions. in large part because we had a sophisticated vendor impersonation scheme, or we had kind of a very, very close vendor description relative to one that we had previously seen genuine transactions with, and a pretty big deviation on what kind of a normal transaction looked like. So the assessment is there was kind of a classic business email compromise, and so it's recommending an escalation, and that we get in touch with the customer. And if you click into this narrative, you'll see very, very detailed summary of its findings, including all of those kind of task outputs compiled into this narrative in the format that we specified with the narrative instruction. So this is where you can really do a lot of this very, very detailed documentation, so that if regulators ever come and want to understand what happened, how you came to a particular determination, it's all very, very clearly documented and human legible, and ready for your team to incorporate into your operations. Right. Do we have some more questions coming in? Looks like we've got a lot of questions coming in, Kunal. We want to go through these one by one.
Yeah, I've been answering some of them in the chat. I can just kind of go through them briefly for anyone else who is not watching. So, Lindsay, so your question actually messaged the team internally where we'll reach out to you and get this set up. So I'm glad to have you here, and excited to get that set up. From Eric, yeah, glad to hear that. Thank you for saying it's impressive. And then, yes, we can help you set it up. The idea was like, we looked basically across our customer base and we were like, okay, these are some common things that people do. And that's sort of the library of tasks that we have set up. And that's pretty simple. You can just kind of toggle it on. These are out of the box tasks that we've tested, right, thoroughly against whatever thousands and thousands of human reviews. So we know that these work reliably. But there are cases in which you want further customization, in which case, we do have the ability to create it on your own if you'd like in the app, but we do have a team of forward deployed engineers who can help you set this up and sort of work with you personally to make sure that it's working the way you expect. And then there's a question from Danielle on, if can it alert if it exceeds thresholds? The answer is absolutely yes. I answered that there, but also just want to flag, you can also alert for a lot of other things. So if it's like your threshold and something else and another thing, and you can create your own conditions and logic based on whatever you want to actually create those thresholds. You can test that against historical data as well as on new data coming in. And then for blocking onboarding without human review, absolutely, you can do that with our real-time rules engine also. And then from Krista, sounds like the AI agents would be set up to happen automatically once an alert is generated. Is that correct? How long does the process take to perform a full analysis on each alert? Is it a quick turnaround once the alerts are generated? This is a great question. So we do have the ability, actually, Connor, if you want to click on the AI section and then just click on the queues. Yeah, there we go. And just click on all queues real quick on the side. So what you can see here, Krista, is these are all the queues in the system, right? And what Connor is able to do is he can just kind of say which ones he wants to toggle on auto review for. So auto review means exactly this: is as soon as the alert is generated, the AI agent will sort of kick off its process and put together this whole packet, so that when the human analyst comes to this, it'll already be ready for them. You can, if you'd like if you want to turn that off, you can also turn it off so that the human has to click start review and then actually generate the thing live. So that's sort of how it works. You also have the option to do the auto close. So if you're feeling really feisty, you can do that as well on certain types of alerts, where it automatically will close out your false positives along with a narrative and an audit trail and everything like that for every action that it took. What we see most commonly is people will do this for like very particular tasks, not for like more complex ones. And then Danielle has another question here. How is the AI hallucination rate with these AI agents in the review process? This is a great question. I'm going to answer this one in a little bit of detail, so please forgive me for anyone who's not interested in the answer. So hallucinations is, I think, we've had a long journey with this. We started doing this in like 2023, like when ChatGPT first came out. We really we initially were like, okay, like how can we use AI in this space? And what we found is like just by itself, without like a harness around it, AI makes mistakes, and ChatGPT says this at the bottom, AI makes mistakes, but please double check your work. And so what we've done is basically there's many different methods. So one method is called temperature. Temperature is something that's a setting in your model where you can actually reduce the temperature to 0. And now they expose this to reduce the creativity in your model. The second thing we do is we'll actually call specific data fields. So it creates like deterministic code, essentially. The AI will generate deterministic code, which then runs in a deterministic fashion so that it doesn't just like make stuff up, right? The other thing we do is what we call eval sets. So an eval set is basically, imagine you have, I'm just going to give an example of a sanctions hit. So a sanctions hit is, is it a match or is it not a match, right, on the name, address, date of birth, so on. So now what is an evaluation set, eval set for short, is basically, you can imagine like a spreadsheet, just for simplification, of one column is the name, right? The second column is the other name, right, the name of the list. And the third column is like, what did the human say? Like, has a human said, yes, this is a match, or is it not a match? And the last column is, what did the AI say? And what you want to do is say like, okay, with this prompt and this context, the AI said, this is correct, right? Like this is a match. The AI said, this is not a match. And the human said, this is a match, this is not a match. You can then look across your data set to see what percentage of the time was the AI right. This is called an evaluation set. Now you might find initially that, okay, on the evaluation set, it doesn't perform too well. It's like maybe, I don't know, let's just say the first time you try it, it's like 50% correct. What you do then is you adjust your prompt, you adjust the context, and then you say, okay, now it's 70% correct. You again adjust your prompt, adjust the context, you get to 90%, adjust the prompt, adjust the context. Eventually you get to 100% correctness. And this way you know that reliably on like thousands of reviews, it'll always produce something statistically that is correct, right? And this is called an evaluation set. Now, where do you get these evaluation sets from, right? You need to have a ton of human reviews to compare against. And that's what we've done at Unit21 is, I mean, we were built initially for humans, right? Like when we started this company, humans are actually doing reviews of the system. And so the benefit here is like we kind of are lucky that we have these 7 years of human reviews where we can actually compare the AI results against them to say like, yeah, actually this is correct or this is not. Otherwise you have to build this from scratch. The other thing is not all humans are great, right? Some humans are wrong sometimes. And so like, who do you compare against? Like you shouldn't compare just against any human. Like just because it's a human who said it doesn't mean it's right. So what we have is like, since we have QA tooling built into the product, we not only know what humans say, we also know which humans are reliable and which humans are not. So what we do is we benchmark our AI agents and their performance to the best humans in the system across the board, right? And this is like a global, like the best compliance, and fraud analysts across the world in our system, where we know their actual QA scores and like how they performed in certain tasks. And so we've been able to benchmark our AI tasks against the board. And like with these benchmarks and eval sets, essentially we're able to prevent statistically hallucinations from happening. So that, I mean, a bit of a long answer to a short question, Daniel, but I hope that answers it. And then Eric says, please talk about the support for human ability to say, we looked at this and it's not fraud. Therefore, we have relevant conditions no longer flag.
So, Kunal, I think this would be a great opportunity to maybe chat about AI rule recommendations.
You want to go for it?
So, yeah. So there are a couple ways that we're doing this. So one is as your team, both positively and negatively, rejects the recommendation of AI. And what we find is that we've set it up so that it is in almost all cases going to be more conservative. So it's going to escalate more things to you when it's not very obviously clear that it should be flagged as a false positive, as you might hope and expect. But when your team does say, hey, this thing that got escalated, it was really a false positive, we didn't need to review this, we're going to use that to do a couple of things. One is we're actually going to use that as training data to refine the agent itself. So the logic that is used for these AI recommendations is going to improve and get more effective over time. But we're also using that same data to feed our AI rule recommendation model. And that's used so that we can actually make recommendations on the rules themselves, so that you can make the rules more efficient and generate fewer false positive alerts in the first place. And so this is a fairly simplistic example where we've got a money mule rule where we might be looking for somebody who interacts with an unusual volume of counterparties. And the system might recommend, excluding new accounts or changing the thresholds or creating some variations for account maturity and their typical transaction patterns, whether they're self-employed, or maybe some that include some considerations for high-risk geographies. And so this allows us to say, for every institution, maybe we start with kind of a basic rule or as sophisticated a rule as you have in mind. But then over time, the system is going to proactively surface these insights to you on what is and what is not correlated with the investigations that ultimately end up getting escalated as kind of worthy of review. It's not automatically training the model. So it's not changing the rule parameters on its own. It's just surfacing these insights that you can then automatically convert into a rule configuration that incorporates all of these recommendations and go through the process of testing this against your existing data to see how it would perform against the incumbent rule, so that you can make a decision and have a clear rationale for why you're making these changes. Again, in the event that regulators are asking you, hey, why did you add this condition here? Why are you filtering it this way? You can point them back and say, hey, we saw this insight from AI and then independently verified and confirmed its findings and decided to make these changes, so that we can focus on the investigations that were most important.
All right, we have another one here from Krista. Since the AI is improving over time, which means changing over time, is there a way to monitor the AI performance over time, not just alert dispositions, but with the benchmark analysis you mentioned earlier? This is a great question, and absolutely. So the way we do this actually is in the background. So we built out this sort of multi-model architecture where we know that the different LLMs perform kind of differently on different tasks, as well as over time, as the models are updated or changed, the performance will change. And so on our eval sets, basically, we're constantly checking to see each model, has the model performance degraded? Is it still the same, for a particular task level against our evaluation sets, to make sure that it's actually still performing, the way that you would expect it to, at least against our benchmarks. We also have now, actually, it's interesting, the EU AI Act, it's one of the strictest one. It is the strictest one now in the world in terms of regulations on AI. And we've actually built to the standard of the EU AI Act, which also requires that you have these sort of model performance benchmarks and a full report that's ready to go for a regulator that says okay, these are the models we're using, what we're using them for, how they perform against the eval sets at the time of the audit. And so this is also something that we offer now out of the box for customers. But yeah, this is a great question, Krista. I think very forward-thinking question. Absolutely very important to keep checking to see how AI is performing. We also offer, I should mention, like testing off your tasks against historical data and alerts and stuff as well, like as you're creating your own custom tasks. So there's a few different ways here. Yeah, really great questions today. Are there or will there be off-the-shelf NACHA rules available? This is a good question. I'm not sure right now. We haven't said like, okay, we're going to create these templates and actually put them in the app or anything. But you can work with your the CSMs and the FTEs, the forward deployed engineers, to put that together. They do have a list, and we have been working with, like we have internally, an ex-auditor that we work with for things like this. So yeah, we do have a list of things that we can kind of set up for you if you'd need. But I mean, ultimately the spirit of the regulation here is that we're like doing the right thing, right? Like, are we putting in reasonable effort to actually cache this kind of activity, which I think depends from, it is a little different from company to company, depending on like where you sit, of course, on the ACH network, but then also what your business is. So depending on the kind of business you are, the kind of activity that you would likely see will probably be different, which is why we've kind of left it on the customization piece. And I think that's actually really important, is to be able to customize it to your particular needs and the kind of activity that you're likely to see in your program.
Yeah, Eric has a great question about data security. So question about the risk associated with passing financial data to the foundational AI companies, and really great question. So essentially the way that we've architected the system, because we don't want to expose any of our customers' data inappropriately, is that we're running local versions of all of these models in a contained environment in AWS Bedrock. So we are running things like Opus from Claude or Mistral or various Amazon models, but the data is actually not ever leaving your AWS account, and it's not being sent to Claude or to Anthropic or to OpenAI or to Amazon for them to use to train their models or anything like that. So very much, a foundation of the way that we've built this here is to protect all of our customers' data.
That was a really great engaged group. Apologies for my fluke of screen share there. Any last questions from the audience? That was a really fantastic discussion. So thank you guys for jumping in and chiming in right away. I'll try it again. Drop this in the chat and in the window. So if you guys want to go deeper into Unit 21, please just book a demo with us, and you'll get one of our greatest hit T-shirts around fraud. Danielle, though, please, you guys can jump on that.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think
differs from other competitors. Hot take.
Yeah. A short question, like Daniel, you've come in with a few of these. It's like short question, long answer, I think, there's a few ways. I think fundamentally, let's start really at the basics, like first principles. Our belief is that this is all data. It's like fraud, risk, AML. It's all a data problem. And that was sort of the inception of the company as well, was exactly this, is your business looks completely different from a different business. And so the data will be different. And if the data is different, that means your monitoring will be different. The activity you want to monitor for will be different. Your workflows will be different. And what that extends to now is your AI agents will be different, right? It's kind of like thinking, like, I don't know, if you go from one company to another, like an AML analyst, right, transfers from one company to another, they get a new job. they still need to go through training at that new company. They're not just like ready to go out of the box, you know. You need to train them on like exactly what it is that they need to be looking for. And I think that's similar with AI agents as well. Now back to the flexible data infrastructure, that I think is what ultimately makes Unit21 unique, is you can bring in any data you want. You can use all that data in your rules, in your investigations, and in your AI agents. So flexibility in data. The second thing is flexibility in your rule creation. So what this means is kind of like what Connor showed, and I think somebody had asked a question. I forget who it was now. It might have been Eric around rules, if I'm not mistaken, is like you know, the ACH. Like, what if the outgoing payment is not ACH? Then what do we do, right? And I think that's a great example of this. Is like, let's say your outgoing payment is like a totally different rail that we've never heard of before. You know, should we care, like as Unit21? And the answer is, the way we're architected, no, we don't care. You have a new rail that comes up tomorrow, like totally fine, still same product, same everything, because it's just data, right, to us. And I think that's really the power of it, is like now flexible rules too. You can create the logic that you want to create on your own. And we didn't show this to you either, but there's text to rule functionality that's in early access right now with some customers, where you can just kind of type in your strategy. It'll look through your data and kind of figure out what kind of rule you want to build. It'll build that for you, and then you can iterate on it from there. So this flexibility in creating your own rule logic is the second one. Number one, flexibility in data. Number two, flexibility in rules. Number three is flexibility in workflows. You have a different workflow from someone else, right? You maybe have 3 teams, all within the US. One works on sanctions, one works on TM, one works on like 314 alerts. I don't know, I'm just making that up, right? Okay, like you can create those queues in Unit21. You can create automations. And when I say automation, this is like before AI was a thing, right? Just like automations where you click a button and it does 20 things in one go. You can set that up by yourself however you want in Unit21. And here's another example. You have a bunch of like, I don't know, international teams, like maybe you have like teams spread across like 40 countries, right? And we have customers like that. Now they have different restrictions. Like if you're outside the US, you can't look at SARS, right? Or you can't look at that kind of activity. Or maybe there's internal investigations going on. You want to make sure that not all analysts can see the internal employee investigations happening. So the ability to create these custom workflows and custom queues, confidential, restricted, different levels of things, that's another thing that would differ. So number one, I said flexible data. Number two, flexible rules. Number three, I just said flexible workflows. And number four, now flexible agents. AI agents are just like, the flexibility is, I think, so I was just, Cassie and I were on a call earlier, we were talking about this, was, when Unit21 first started, I think one of the reasons for the inception of the company was Trisha, our founder, she was a PM at a firm on the risk team, and the AML team would come to her saying, hey, like, can you write these rules for me? And then she would go to the engineering team, who would then build those rules, and then they would go back and say, like, Trisha would go back and say, okay, here are the rules. And they would say, hey, can you make some adjustments? Okay, back to the engineering team. They'd be like, okay, we want to test it. Okay, back to the engineering team. And this cycle is just going back and forth. And what we're seeing now is like the same thing happening with AI agents. Like some people are saying, okay, we want to try building AI ourselves. And what that means in practice is like, actually, it's pretty hard. Like making AI do the right thing consistently. You need to have all these evaluation sets, like all this like stuff set up around the model itself. Like the model is just like the engine to the car. I can't just hand you an engine and say, go on a road trip, you need the car around it. And that's sort of what Unit21 is like, you can now create your own agents, test your own agents in our risk infrastructure, rather than just us giving something to you that we would expect kind of works for you. Put the control into the hands of the practitioner. And I think that's really what makes Unit21 different. Yeah, Eric says, that's great news, new payment type. Great. It's just data, man. It's okay. Yeah. And then Krista, is the AI just for monitoring? Can it be used for other tasks like drafting business related documents that can incorporate the data? Yeah, that's actually pretty creative. You can, in theory, do that. So you can create your own tasks and your own narrative instructions to use whatever data you want. If that data is coming into Unit21, it can basically create that. Well, I mean, you can use the same narrative functionality to just create that. You can also incorporate online search if that's something you want to do, and you can point it at certain data elements to say, I want you to search using these terms and this data with this type of summary to kind of create that as well. I mean, it is built for risk programs, of course, but like, you could, in theory, totally do that as well, Krista. That's a great question. All right. I hope, Daniel, I don't know, that was I said long answer to a short question. I hope that answered it for you.
All right. You always have to let a few moments of silence for someone shy to ask the question. We have 5 more minutes, but all right. Thank you guys so much for joining. We will email out this recording, and feel free to follow up with us if we can go any deeper into those questions that you guys asked today. And thanks again for such great engagement. See you guys next time.
Thank you, everyone.